The day Karen rolled up in her oversized SUV, red-faced and panting like a bloodhound on a scent, I thought it was another routine summons of her iron-fisted rule enforcement. But when she stormed onto my front lawn brandishing her HOA violation notice as if it were a battle flag, I had no idea that her demand would nearly cost us our lives. Her bulk cast a shadow over the small white picket fence, her voice thunderous in the quiet morning air as she declared that I had exactly 7 days to dismantle that eyesore or face fines that would bleed my savings dry, and the neighborhood watched through parted curtains as Karen paced back and forth, clipboard in hand, muttering about property values and community standards that she'd invented on the spot. Never had I imagined that my reply that the fence was installed under county permit to secure our property against wildlife would send her into a tirade so fierce it seemed to crack the calm of the suburban morning in two, her voice echoing off the siding of our house like a storm warning. I pointed out calmly, beneath the hazy glow of sunrise, that my permit hung framed on the garage wall just inside the door, legal evidence of the fence's purpose: to protect my children from wandering off into the dense woods where bears occasionally foraged for berries. But Karen's eyes blazed with indignation as she waved the notice, her rotund body vibrating like an overripe fruit ready to burst, insisting that no one wants to look at that ugly picket monstrosity, and that our community aesthetic required clean lines and modern fences only. To which I replied that nothing on earth would make me dismantle the one barrier standing between my family and potential harm, and that our county's regulations clearly allowed wildlife fencing in designated zones, facts that made her mouth snap shut like a mousetrap. Her face flushed deeper than crimson, veins throbbing at her temple, as she shouted over the hum of cicadas, "You'll regret this," then stormed back to her vehicle, tires gouging the gravel in her haste. Relief washed over me when she finally sped away, but it was short-lived. Less than an hour later, neighbors called breathless to warn me of massive bear tracks circling the fence line, claw marks gouging at the wood where the fence posts met the earth. I felt my blood run cold as I realized that while Karen raged, I had neglected to check the perimeter, and now a hungry black bear was testing our barrier as if it were made of toothpicks, the fence swaying under each intentional push, the dark shape of the bear visible through gaps in the slats, hunger and desperation etched in its mud-caked fur. And I knew that without that fence standing firm, my family would have been torn apart before sunrise. In a blur, I dialed the county wildlife rescue hotline, my hands shaking so badly that the plastic buttons felt like cobblestones. The operator assured me they'd be there in 30 minutes but cautioned me to maintain a safe distance and never attempt to scare a bear without professional help. And as I retreated to the back porch with my wife and 2 small children clutching each other, I saw Karen's SUV once more. She had returned, perhaps hoping to gloat over my frantic state. But she froze at the sight of the bear leaning against my fence, its massive head almost level with the top rail, sniffing the air as if savoring the scent of human fear. Karen's clipboard dropped to the ground with a dull thud, and her confident swagger collapsed into pure, palpitating terror. But the shock I felt when the wildlife officers arrived was nothing compared to the twist that followed. Just as they prepared to tranquilize the bear, another vehicle cruised down the dirt road, a battered pickup driven by my retired firefighter neighbor, Marcus, who leapt out and shouted that he'd been tracking the same bear for weeks after spotting it near his hunting cabin, and that the fence was the only thing preventing a full-on attack. Marcus brandished his own set of wildlife permits and a motion sensor camera clip showing the bear's nightly patrols, proof that my fence was not an eyesore, but a life-saving defense. The wildlife officers nodded, their stern faces shifting to relief, and one officer turned to Karen and said, "Ma'am, this is not ornamental, it's life-saving. You're interfering with a protective barrier." Karen's face contorted from anger to shame in an instant, her mouth quivering like a wounded bird. The confrontation reached its peak when Karen, unwilling to accept reality, attempted to step toward the fence, only to be rebuked by the lead officer's sharp command to stand back under threat of trespassing charges. She staggered back, her breath ragged, as the bear, tranquilized mid-growl, collapsed gently against the fence, the last thing it saw before sleep enveloped it. The officers hauled it into a cage on wheels, securing our home's safety for good. Karen blinked repeatedly, as though trying to erase the memory of her terror, her entitlement evaporating like morning mist. In the days following the incident, my family and neighbors rallied together in unexpected ways. Marcus spearheaded a volunteer patrol group that installed motion-activated lights around the property's perimeter and distributed bear safety pamphlets to the entire community. We hosted an educational barbecue at the very spot where Karen's arrogance nearly led to tragedy, inviting wildlife experts and county officials to speak. Children ran through sprinkler systems set up to mimic bear avoidance tactics, laughing and learning how simple measures could save lives. Meanwhile, Karen's once vaunted social media pages lay silent, her posts replaced by apologies scrawled on hastily written notes that vanished as quickly as they appeared. Despite her attempts to regain favor, no one invited her to committee meetings or neighborhood gatherings, and her phone calls went unanswered. Then came the official HOA meeting, a high-stakes affair meant to quell lingering tension and rewrite community guidelines. I sat at one end of the long conference table, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing on my shoulders. Karen arrived late, her bulk forced through the narrow doorway, clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield. The room greeted her presence with a heavy quiet, punctuated only by the hum of the air conditioner. As she cleared her throat, the president of the HOA paused, adjusted his glasses, and addressed her directly. "Your actions endangered a resident's family and wildlife. We're here to ensure our rules protect everyone." Murmurs of assent rippled through the room. Karen attempted to speak, but her voice cracked under the pressure. Instead, a motion was seconded to ratify a new bylaw. Any wildlife-related structures, fences, lights, or signage would be grandfathered in and protected unless deemed unsafe by county authorities. No removal, no fines, and any HOA-appointed official engaging in individual enforcement would face immediate dismissal. The vote passed unanimously, and Karen's face fell as the gavel struck, sealing her defeat in stone. The final act unfolded under a crimson sunset. We gathered at the edge of the woods for what had become our annual Safety First Festival, renamed in honor of the fence that stood guard. A new wooden plaque, painted in vibrant colors by neighborhood children, read, "Our Barrier, Our Blessing 2025. It swung gently in the evening breeze as laughter and music filled the clearing. I watched Karen from a distance, no longer the stormy presence she once was, but a solitary figure shuffling away, her smartphone held uselessly in her hand. I turned to my family and friends, warmth blooming in my chest. "We did the right thing," I whispered, and my wife squeezed my hand in agreement. The fence had become more than wood and nails. It stood for resilience, community, and the belief that rules exist to protect, not oppress. The air cooled as dusk faded to night, and the fence stood sentinel beneath the pale glow of the newly installed motion lights. I surveyed the scene, families clustered around lantern-bright picnic tables, elderly neighbors swapping stories of past wildlife encounters, and children tracing bare paw imprints stenciled into the ground as part of our educational exhibit. The tension that had gripped our community in the days before felt like a distant echo, replaced by the steady hum of collective relief. I felt pride settle into my bones, knowing that our stand hadn't been merely about a fence, but about standing up for the safety that binds us together. As the lantern light danced across the white pickets, I reflected on the journey we'd taken. From a single, noisy confrontation with an overzealous HOA enforcer to a town-wide reckoning with our principles and the very nature of community governance. When Karen first demanded the fence's removal, she believed she held absolute power. Instead, her attempt to erase a life-saving barrier became the sparks that ignited our unity. I wandered toward the edge of the assembly where Marcus and I had placed a time capsule-sealed metal cylinder containing the bear safety pamphlets, photos of our transformed fence line, and a signed copy of the new wildlife bylaw. Years from now, whoever unearths these artifacts will glimpse both our fears and our resolve. Their discovery will tell the story of neighbors who refuse to let fear or entitlement trump responsibility. Behind me, laughter rose as the local wildlife biologist, Dr. Harper, described her close encounters with bears and wolves, emphasizing the delicate balance between human settlements and natural habitats. She pointed to the fence and called it a graceful compromise, proof that respect for wildlife need not clash with human enterprise. Children lined up to ask her questions, their eyes wide with curiosity, and I realized that our fence had become more than a physical barrier. It was a bridge between two worlds. I joined the seminar circle, where Karen's absence was as conspicuous as her presence had once been. No apology note lay waiting, no sudden change of heart. Instead, she chose to stay away, perhaps unwilling to face the community she'd threatened. In her place, others once silent observers now stepped forward, eager to contribute ideas for wildlife-friendly landscaping and shared responsibilities for community safety. That, I thought, was the true testament to victory, the transformation of passive bystanders into invested participants. Night deepened, and we lit the bonfire that stood beside the fence. Flames licked the night sky, illuminating faces etched with contentment rather than dread. My wife wrapped her arm around me, and I whispered, "We built more than a fence tonight." She nodded, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "We built trust," she said. Even as we celebrated, I felt the weight of responsibility settle like embers in my chest. Our story would not end with the fall of one bully. It required vigilance, compassion, and constant dialogue to maintain the balance we'd fought for. I looked at the plaque, our barrier, our blessing 2025, and smiled at its simplicity. Sometimes, it's the smallest acts of defiance that yield the greatest protection. The last embers of the bonfire glowed, and we extinguished the flames with reverence. I walked the length of the fence, placing a hand on each post as if greeting old friends. Each groove and chip told a chapter of our shared ordeal. The scratch marks from the bear's frantic pushes, the bullet holes from a misguided hunter's stray shot now repaired and painted white once more. This fence had tasted fear and borne witness to human folly. Now it bore witness to our collective resilience. When the guests drifted away under a sky spangled with stars, I remained by the fence, listening to the soft hum of crickets and the occasional rustle of leaves. Somewhere in the woods, I knew the bear would roam again, but tonight, it would find our defenses, our compassion, and our respect for its place in the wild. I took a deep breath, the crisp summer air filling my lungs, and felt the weight of fear lift entirely. Walking back to the cabin, I passed by the old wooden sign "Fence versus Fury," now framed by lanterns and flowers. I gave it a gentle push and felt it settle firmly in the ground. After all, some stories end not with defeat, but with a community awakened, united by a simple truth, that safety and harmony are built one plank at a time. Share your thoughts should a moment of crisis bind us closer or drive us further apart. Let us know whether you believe our fence was a lifesaver or an ego battleground, and how you'd balance individual rights with community safeguards when danger lurks just beyond your door.